We're here today with Dr. Joseph Mercola of Mercola.com. He has the world's leading natural health website. Dr. Mercola, I love your new book. You sent me advance copy, and I'm well into it now. Excellent job.
Well, thank you. It took about 3 years to put together, and I know you also enjoyed Dr. Furstenberg's Invisible Rainbow. He happened to be one of the reviewers for the book and gave me feedback on it, along with a dozen other people. So it's just not my collective views. It's the wisdom of the expert community, especially when it comes to the practical recommendations in the book, which focuses on specific strategies that people can implement to insulate themselves and protect themselves from this pervasive radio frequency and other EMF exposures.
First, I just want to, start with asking you, why is it, you think, that most people are not yet aware of the EMF problem?
Well, it's the central crux of the challenge. Probably the simplest way to explain that is to give the analogy of the tobacco industry. My mom passed away a few years ago largely as a consequence of smoking for 5 decades or more. And even though I was pleading with her as a child, and because I knew that it was a problem, but she didn't when she was a child when she started. And that was largely not because she was ignorant, as tens of millions of other Americans who also engaged in the behavior, is that they were fooled, they were deceived, they were told that it wasn't harmful. There were ads by physicians claiming healthier cigarette and it would improve your health even. So, I mean, people have all seen these ads. And then in the 1950s, the science became relatively clear, and the tobacco industry knew that their product caused harm and damage. That's what the records show and the depositions in court cases. Yet they were still able to obfuscate the truth from the general population for 5 additional decades before it came out. And this is despite the fact that even the federal regulatory agencies that were assigned given the role rather of protecting the public health warning people about tobacco. They encourage people not to smoke. So, and yet this effective public relation strategies and media campaigns the tobacco industry deployed essentially allowed them to perpetuate this myth. And similarly, the wireless industry dwarfs the tobacco industry's influence. Not only do they deploy the same strategies, but they also have far more effectively controlled the federal regulatory agencies. In fact, they've captured most of them, which is the crux of the problem. So rather than the agencies that are assigned the role of protecting us and warning of these dangers, they are actually telling us they are safe because they have been essentially captured by the wireless industry. So it would take an enormous amount of objective, independent, investigative effort to objectively make the conclusion yourself that these exposures are dangerous. And you can do that. And I lay out the art. I'm not the only book that's done this. There's many others. I think mine is probably one of the best with respect to summarizing the crux of the science and providing people with practical strategies. Most of the books, especially like Dr. Furstenberg's Invisible Rainbow, really focus extensively on the history and provide the comprehensive data that you need to explore to confirm this is the case. But once you've done that, then you need information on how to implement action to protect yourself and your family.
Yeah, and your book does that brilliantly. I mean, and you mentioned Arthur Furstenberg is one of the consultants you used. You got the best of the best here to overview every aspect of your book and just to refine it. Brian Hoyer, Martha Herbert, Stephanie Seneff, Sharon Goldberg, and Magda Havas, both of which are speakers in the 5G Summit. Orem Miller, Nicholas Pino, Peter Sullivan. So these are the best of the best in terms of the consultants and contributors to the book. And you have, this is also, Dr. Mercola, I mean, I'm looking at 68 pages of the scientific studies listed in fairly fine print, but still readable, on
Yeah,
that
and
directly answers.
we could have easily put 680 pages in there. There's that many references, but the point is not to overwhelm people. It's just that they need some ammunition to provide skeptical professionals, and the best studies are summarized, not summarized, but at least referenced there that they can have access to.
Yeah, and it's powerful. I mean, this can answer anyone's question who is a skeptic still, or who's still trying to,
Yeah.
you know.
And they
So
should be skeptic. I mean, you shouldn't trust me. You should go out and investigate yourself, but there's only so much time that you have, and you have to rely on some someone to at least do the due diligence for you and then check them out. But there's only, we have a limited amount of time, and that's why I put the book together, to provide people with a simple, quick solution to confirm your concerns, and then, as I said, provide practical solutions.
in your book, you talk about ionizing and non-ionizing, and how non-ionizing does damage in a different way. And you
Mhm.
talk about the hydroxyl free radical. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that it squarely addresses that, you know,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to go too deep into the science because we have limited time, but there is no controversy at all among any respectable scientist that ionizing radiation or X-rays or gamma rays or neutrons from radioactive sources will cause DNA damage. That's uncontroversial. No one disputes that. And it causes the damage because it generates this hydroxyl free radical, which normally our body creates. It creates in the mitochondria, but it's a very short-lived biological half-life of only a billionth of a second. I mean, it's crazy, 10 to the minus 9. So because it lives so shortly, it can't travel very far. So when it's generated in the mitochondria, it cannot travel out of the mitochondria into the nucleus. It's just impossible. It doesn't live long enough. But the radiation from ionizing rays can actually go directly into the nucleus, and they have short wavelengths, and they're so strong they can damage the DNA in two ways. One is these wavelengths can directly break the covalent bonds in DNA, which is the way most professionals think they cause damage. But actually, the majority of the damage is caused from the radiation interacting within the water in the nucleus, and that's spinning off an hydroxyl free radical. And because it's right there, it can damage the DNA. So because of its close proximity, uh, the non-ionizing radiation, which is most professionals and public health authorities claim is safe, because it supposedly doesn't damage DNA, but that's false. It's false on steroids. It doesn't damage it by the way that the conventional standards are using to measure the damage, which is thermally or by heat, because it's not an irrational approach, because these frequencies are very similar to microwaves, and microwaves, of course, heat your food, and that is one mechanism that they can damage you. There's no question. But the amount of radiation coming out of your phone or your Wi-Fi router does not generate enough heat to cause thermal damage. It doesn't. They are correct. Unless you're holding it right up to your head, it's not going to do that. But it interacts with your cell membranes in a way that causes oxidative damage, oxidative stress, which essentially generates a different free radical called peroxynitrite, which does live millions of times longer than the hydroxyl, and it does have time to travel to the nucleus and damage the DNA the same way that ionizing radiation does, causing very similar biological damage.
So what is 5G exactly, and why? What are the concerns from your
Well,
perspective?
5G is the newest version of wireless, fifth generation, and it's being promoted to provide benefits to the consumer. And there's no question it does provide some. It provides, the biggest one is greater data, up to 100 times more bandwidth is typically available, between 50 and 100, depending on your circumstances. So that's a good thing. But what they fail to tell you is that you could get the same benefit if you were connected by a cable without any exposure at all to these wireless frequencies. And in fact, the technology with cable or fiber optics increases faster than it does with wireless, so that you can, as time goes on, of course, we have advances in technology and increases in speed and decreases in latency. And those improvements in fiber will be faster than it will in wireless with no risk of radiation. Now, clearly, there's no, uh, you cannot transmit this data to with wire fibers and wires to every device. I mean, you certainly can do it to your cell phone or these mobile device, other mobile devices
But
where
you can plug your phone in, and most people still
you
don't
can.
know that you can have an Ethernet connection on your phone.
You can. It's a little bit complex, but I think I pretty much I review that in the book too, on how you can. You have to buy adapters to do this, and it depends on the phone, of course. But that's a safer way to do it. Uh, and then you can plug into the wire, and you can use your wired connection, which is a lot better to do. So, um, but anyway, the primary motivation that drives 5G from the wireless industry is the intent to create more profits. And the downside is it's going to increase the exposure to these frequencies quite dramatically, probably by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude.
And you have in your book here, there's another example that you use to help just contextualize this. So the amount of radiation we're dealing with now is 1 billion times the amount of radiation that was around 100 years ago in these specific gigahertz type frequencies that we're talking about.
Yeah, somewhere about the 2 gigahertz, or 1 to 2 gigahertz. And those figures actually have to write the book at some point, right? And it goes to press. And the data that you acquire is from studies that were previously published. So those figures are about 3 years old now. So it was 10 to the 15th, an increase over 100 years ago. 10 with 15 zeros. That's a billion. It's just crazy. It's a number that's incomprehensible. But you'd probably have to add 2 or 3 more zeros in 2020 now.
Yeah. And I know our readers are familiar with this, but just again to highlight for those who aren't, you know, are there safety studies on 5G specifically? Has the industry done safety studies, and if not, how can this be happening if not?
Yeah, they haven't. They have not done, and that's not necessarily disparaging the industry. It's because the technology advances so quickly, and the process of establishing studies and getting funding for them, and then doing them, and then collaborating, collecting the data and publishing it takes years. So to give you an example, the most recent study, which really contradicts the World Health Organization uh, finding that classified cell phones as a class 2B carcinogen, means possible carcinogen. They're really a class 1A. They cause cancer. And this was most definitively showed by the NTP, the National Toxicology Program study published in 2018, funded by the National Institutes of Health to the tune of $25 million, which proved that it was a class 1 carcinogen. So this study, the reason I wanted to mention that was done, probably started 5-6 years ago, maybe 7, and it was not done with 4G. It was done with 2 and 3G. So there's this lag period that really limits the ability to do these studies. But the bottom line is correct, as you asserted, that there's been no safety studies on 5G.
So, I just want to ask you, in this onslaught of EMF and the situation where we know that it's causing harm, the science is clear, the anecdotal evidence, the amount of people that are suffering and have connected the dots is clear. But the governing agencies and kind of the mainstream not acknowledging this yet. Are you hopeful for the future, Dr. Mercola, and what would be required to redirect this situation?
Oh, I'm very hopeful. I think the humans can be quite resilient. That requires a significant commitment to upgrading your personal health. There are many strategies you can take to do that. But if you're living a regular lifestyle, consuming this SAD diet, the standard American diet, eating many processed carbohydrates and fats, and eating at least 16 hours a day, and not exercising much and not sleeping well and exposing yourself to blue light, not getting much sunlight exposure, then you're going to die prematurely. There's just no question about it. These exposures to EMF will catalyze and accelerate that process. However, if you can address these issues and provide a sanctuary for yourself at night, especially, where you're essentially living in a really low exposure, almost unmeasurable, which is what you can create. And there's details in the book on how to do that. This is what I do at night. I sleep in essentially a Faraday cage, which essentially almost neutralizes all the measurable radiation. So if you are in that environment, then your body becomes resilient. And in fact, when you're exposed to these radio frequencies, is inevitable. It's impossible to escape them, and especially with the implementation of satellites that SpaceX is in the process. They have, at this point, 300 satellites they've already launched. They have tentative permission for 42,000 satellites. That's 20 times more satellites than all the satellites ever launched put together. And all these will be not at 22,000 geostationary orbits. They will be in low Earth orbit satellites, 200 to 300 miles up, essentially blanketing the entire world with these frequencies. So that's a good reason to understand that you're going to have at least two orders of magnitude higher exposure to these frequencies because of the satellite exposures. You're just not going to be able to escape it. No, in the ruralist location, you won't be able to. So avoidance is not possible, which is, to me, the only other biological solution is to upgrade your resilience. You do that by the strategies I just mentioned.
Yeah, so upgrade your resilience and decrease your exposure, and at the same time,
At least, I mean, you can't eliminate it. It's impossible to eliminate it.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
And at the same time, like doing so, taking care of your body so that you do have the energy to live your life and to share this information and be part of the change. And like these 42,000 satellites is not a done deal. There's 300 up there right now, but people are
it's close
5G.
to it. I don't know how that's going to change. You know, anything's possible, but boy, it seems like it's pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered.
And the basis of advocating for our possible way out of this is spreading this awareness as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah. So the side effect of increasing and improving your resilience is that you're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. You're going to live longer, and more importantly, live healthier, have less any of the chronic degenerative diseases. 60% of adults, 60%, that's the vast majority, right, have one chronic illness. 40% of kids have at least one chronic illness. I mean, we're devastated with them, largely because we are choosing to ignore these time-honored strategies of living naturally and providing our body with the resources they are required to optimize their health. And if you do that, you're going to get sick. It's inevitable consequence. Our bodies want to stay healthy. And that is what they're given its own resources. You give them what it requires and you limit your exposure to these toxins, you're going to be healthy. That is just where it goes. It doesn't go to sickness, and it doesn't go to a position where you're going to require medications. There's it's a very unusual circumstance where you need a drug. Almost every single drug ever invented is merely to treat a symptom. It rarely ever treats a cause. And almost none of them are absolutely required. Sometimes, I mean, occasionally it could save your life, like antibiotics, but even septic shock, that 1 out of 5 people in the world today, 1 out of 5 people die from septic shock. And that is despite the use of antibiotics. Yet we know from studies that we have an intervention that will cure 85% of those people. The intervention is something as simple and expensive as vitamin C, intravenous, along with some thiamine and hydrocortisone. and that's not an antibiotic. But actually vitamin C in that case is really a safe and natural drug because it converts to hydrogen peroxide, which effectively kills the organisms. But it's still a lot safer than these antibiotics. But this tangent, the issue is that drugs rarely ever cure the disease. They're symptomatic, potentially dangerous band-aids.
Something that I notice in myself, Dr. Mercola, and I see kind of reference, and other people have been talking about it too, is this idea of it's becoming more and more about like natural versus artificial or synthetic, isn't it? Like if we're around natural frequencies, if we're connected naturally with the earth, with the sun, we're getting sunlight, we're out there earthing with our bare feet, we're minimizing our exposure to wireless, and artificial man-made frequencies with square waves, not naturally occurring sine waves, then that's really a winning strategy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think really, in my view, one of the essential strategies that one needs to implement to optimize your health, and one that I have personally done by moving to Florida. So most of the year, I'm able to go outside without a shirt, wearing shorts, and walk in the ocean for at least a half hour, maybe an hour, absorbing these frequencies. Because it's not, excuse me, it's not just about doing that to create vitamin D. And I haven't swallowed a vitamin D pill in over a decade, and my vitamin D levels are 70 nanograms per milliliter, which is a very healthy range. Uh, and so it's not just about that. It's also about structuring the water through the exposure with these ultraviolet, I'm sorry, near infrared A that will optimize your mitochondrial health and also improve things like nitric oxide in your body.
Yeah. I like how you talk about your journey into this awareness as a doctor, into this awareness about EMF harm. And you say, I now see that unless you take serious action to lower your EMF exposure, which you're talking about doing, increasing resiliency, lowering your EMF exposure, you will not be able to achieve full health no matter how carefully you eat or how strategic you are in your lifestyle choices. So talk to us, if you could, give us perhaps 3 other solutions that, I know there's so many in the book, but what else can people
just
do?
expand a bit, because I think it's an important point, is that the younger you are, the more resilient you are. That's just the way God created you. But so that means that kids and young adults can really bash their biology, trash it completely before they're going to notice anything. But even given that resiliency, there are a fair number of adolescents who are dropping with these severe illnesses because they have so many other challenges to themselves. So they're not immune. It just takes longer. But the older you are, the more susceptible you are to these damages, because there's the more your biology has deteriorated over time. This is sort of entropy taking hold. So, but the asked for 3. So there are far more than 3. And in fact, there is a resource we created, which is at emf.mercola.com, that you can get a summary of chapter 7 of the book for free, that has dozens and dozens and dozens of specific recommendations. But the top 3 would probably be really paying careful attention to your cell phone and how you use it. It should never be on your body unless it's in airplane mode. And even then, I would use a Faraday bag around that mode. And then I still don't put it on my body. I carry it in a backpack, so I keep it off my body. So this is a dangerous device. It's almost like a mini cell phone tower on your body. And when you're using it, I mean, you should minimize your use. That's another strategy, is keep it in airplane mode most of the time. And I just charged my phone last night, and I'll probably have to recharge in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's the benefit. You don't have to charge your phone once or even twice a day. You can charge it once every 2 weeks. Admittedly, I have an iPhone 11 and it has a bigger battery. So, that is a bit of an advantage, but even so, you want to keep it in airplane mode. That will keep you the safest. Then the other thing is your Wi-Fi. You want to turn it off at night at a minimum. Ideally, you'd like to contract with a home theater company or another organization that can come to your home and install cables into your home and essentially run hard wires from your Wi-Fi, from your cable modem, so that you can connect directly with your devices and not have any Wi-Fi in your environment. So you might say, well, all my neighbors have it. Well, your neighbors' Wi-Fi routers are not in your house, so they're probably not impacting you as much. And if you really want it to take it to the next level, you can hire consultants like Brian Hoyer and others who can come to your home and actually usually have $20,000-$30,000 worth of equipment. They can come and do these measurements and find out where these sources are and give you specific remediation strategies. But you can do a pretty good job from the advice that we have in the book to at least start the process and maybe get you 75-80% of the way there.
Yeah, and something like this, I mean, this is my new favorite for an economically priced testing device to show you, how much you're getting, right? How much
Yeah, we all
radiation
need those things. There's a wide range of devices. We discuss them in the book too. That you need three different types: one to measure radio frequencies, one for electric fields, one for four: one for magnetic fields, and then one for dirty electricity.
Yeah, dirty electricity. And you covered that in the book too. You have a quote from
Mm-hmm.
Sam Milham talking about every cell tower in the world makes dirty electricity by the ton. And people don't think of this. You don't think
it's a complex product, but I actually interviewed Sam. He's an MD, MPH, Master Public Health and epidemiologist, and does some really landmark work, which he summarized in his book called Dirty Electricity. Really pioneer and helping us understand this complex issue, but it's definitely there. You can choose to ignore it, but it doesn't mean it's not going to impact your health. And Magda Havas has done some interesting studies showing dirty electricity, its influence on diabetes and metabolic syndrome. So how you can actually filter these frequencies out with certain capacitors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just installed a whole home dirty electricity filter called Sine
That's the
Tamer.
best way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so finally you mentioned magnesium. You talk about it and how is it significant? Why is it significant? And I just started to supplement with magnesium powder recently. Like I started again after being off of it for a long time, and I noticed almost immediately there's just more stable sort of energy. So what's the benefit of magnesium? Why?
Well, magnesium is used in hundreds of different chemical reactions in your body. So, and about at least 80% of us are deficient in magnesium. Most likely you are too. So the downsides of taking magnesium are pretty minimal. It's one of those supplements that almost everyone needs. There's a wide variety of different magnesium supplements you can take, and I discuss those in detail in the book because it's a bit complex because you really need to focus on the elemental magnesium. One of the downsides of side effects, which actually makes it very safe, is that magnesium can be a laxative. It is a laxative. So that, in other words, if you're taking too much, you're going to poop it out. So that makes it almost impossible to overdose on magnesium. And it's so important. It will actually help support your membranes to keep them more resilient and resistant to the damage from EMFs and causing this cascade of events that occurs when they're exposed to these frequencies that this ultimately results in release of peroxynitrate and damage in the DNA.
So supplementing with a good quality magnesium helps to prevent the harm caused by what Dr. Martin Paul and others, and Richard Lear and others talk about, this voltage-gated calcium channel problem with
because magnesium is a natural calcium channel blocker.
Yeah, very good. What do you think about harmonizers, pendants, the devices that you plug in and they emit high frequencies that are sort of undefined? Is that something that we can use and benefit?
It's a controversial area. Clearly, some people find benefit with them, but from a biological perspective, these harmonizers do nothing to shield you or your loved ones from this radiation exposure. So they probably are still causing very similar biological damage, even though you may not be experiencing symptoms, which and sometimes can make them give you a false sense of security and make you worse. So in other words, there are so many people who put these stickers on their phones and then believe they're protected, and they're just holding their phone up to their head all day long, talking on the phone. Thinking, I've got a sticker on, it's not going to be a problem. It's protecting me. That is a foolish strategy from my perspective. So I don't think there's any harm. That's the major harm if it's going to change your behavior. But if you're using them and not changing the way that you normally would use it, then it probably isn't going to hurt. But it's not going to create this magic force field that that insulates you from these exposures. It just isn't.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Dr. Joseph Mercola, thank you so much for your time today and for writing this book. I mean, this is a service to our community, to all communities, to the planet, really everyone everywhere. When you realize the extent of the problem, we want to read this book so that humanity is not EMF'd, right? We want,
yes.
We want to get
or you not humanity. That's the global intention, but certainly for yourself or your family, which is where it really starts. You know, the people you love and care about, because it's just going to happen inevitably down the road that if you continue to ignore these exposures, you'll get harmed. Just like my mother, who passed away prematurely a few years ago because she didn't believe that smoking continuously is going to cause her problems. And tens of millions of people died because they chose to ignore these warnings. And it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be a guinea pig. You don't have to wait decades before the science comes out conclusively and is in the headline of every major newspaper, and all the public health authorities are now warning you. I mean, you don't have to wait, because that's not going to happen for 30 or 40 years. You know, it doesn't mean it's not causing problems before, then it's definitely causing it. And it's an important enough an issue where you at least need to explore this and conclude objectively for yourself if it's an issue or not.
Yeah, and I love the examples you give in the book of like X-rays and those, pedoscopes of like, say shoe salesmen X-raying people's feet, and then it took what 40 years, right, with lead and thalidomide and
these were the fluoroscopes that were in shoe stores that maybe some people watching this remember or heard of, because they were around up until 1970. And they were marketing gadgets that were in many, many shoe stores. And their primary purpose was not to get people, that's what they alluded to or purported they were being used to give kids their better fitting shoes. And they would manipulate the parents into coming to their stores because they wanted to take care of their kids. And they would expose them to this. And they were ionizing radiation. That was in these devices were implemented in 1920, 1930. And they knew ionizing radiation caused cancer. It wasn't controversial back then. It was well documented, and they still got away with it for decades. So, so it's the same process. But it's even more premature because it's not established in the scientific community, at least definitively and non-controversially, that non-ionizing radiation can contribute to cancer. But we know it does.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, Dr. Mercola, thank you again for being with us today. And I just encourage everyone out there to get a copy of this book. If you can, share it. And you can go to emf.mercola.com to download a free chapter. And the book is available now.
The most important chapter on what to do.
Yes. Thank you for making that available for free. And the book is available now as of mid-February 2020 on Amazon. Is that the best place people can get it, on Amazon?
Probably, yeah. We don't sell it on our site, so.
Okay, good. So thank you, Dr. Mercola. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. Thank you, Josh.
You can't see it, taste it, or feel it, but it's there, surrounding you, whether you're in your home, at work, or school. And it's putting your health in danger. So the question is, are you EMF? You may not notice it, but you're being bombarded every day by invisible frequencies that can damage your physical and mental well-being. EMFs can include healthy frequencies like sunlight, but over the last century, we have had a literal explosion in our exposure to unnatural frequencies that have increased by over a billion-fold. That's a lot. You can see every time that you use your cell phone, Wi-Fi, or computer connected to the internet, you're actually being exposed to these dangerous frequencies. Yet, thanks to stealth tactics of the wireless industry and captured federal regulatory agencies that are not protecting you anymore, we've been kept in the dark about these dangers. In 2011, the World Health Organization classified cell phones as a Class 2B possible carcinogen. But the $23 million NTP study published in 2018, funded by the National Institutes of Health, showed that it is indeed a Class 1 carcinogen, meaning it causes cancer in humans. You probably don't realize it, but EMFs damage your health very similar to the way X-rays do, that no expert will disagree with in their ability to cause cancer. Cell phone and wireless radiation exposures radically increase oxidative stress and inflammation in your body, which increases your risk of virtually every chronic disease. Cancer, of course, heart disease, cardiac arrhythmias, infertility, diabetes, arthritis, neurodegenerative diseases, cataracts, and dozens of other diseases that are just too numerous to list. 5G rollouts are just around the corner, but you may not realize that SpaceX Starlink program is planning on launching 42,000 low Earth orbiting satellites to completely blanket the Earth in 5G internet. That is 4 times as many satellites as are currently in orbit. That is why I'm so passionate about this topic and why I believe EMF is one of the most important books you should read today. EMF will give you a radical new understanding of how EMFs impact your body and brain and how they speed up aging and lead to disease. When you read this book, you'll discover loads of practical and simple strategies to help your body repair and recover from the damage caused by these wireless exposures. Even better than repairing the damage from EMFs is learning how to minimize your exposure to in the first place, whether you're indoors or outdoors, and this book will show you just how to do that. EMF offers many practical and affordable methods to eradicate worst exposures in your home. If you already have a chronic health issue, I couldn't stress this more. You need this book, because if you don't address your current EMF exposures, you are simply sabotaging your efforts to ever get better. I urge you to order a copy of EMF today before it's too late. Get started on the road to recovery and protect yourself and your family from this pervasive menace. It's one of the most important health topics you can do to take control of your health.